Welcome to Friday night's video in our second master series. I do believe this is the 85th video in our second master series, the 34th video in our basic processors, and the 21st video on reverb and convolution. 21 videos so far. Okay, next we wanted to talk about something that I talked about in my first master series. So I do suggest you go back and watch the processing part on my first master series when we were dealing with reverb and spatialization. And at the end of processing, we dealt with spatialization. I talked about it a little bit there. And I do believe in mixing concepts in that first master series. This is echo effect. So why would we want to mess with echo effect? Well, there's a simple answer for that. First of all, echo acts on the first principle is that it's outside of the Haas effect. So like within like 30 some odd milliseconds, it doesn't sound like two hits. Outside of 36 milliseconds, say that and you put a delay on it, it sounds like two hits. Ba-bap. Does that make sense? And this is a delay echo effect. We are looking for an echo effect, not a delay, which is kind of the same thing. Kind of, this application, we are going to look at it as an echo effect. Because if you're dealing with a spatialization in some type of like big cathedral, that people don't go in there and go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, wow, I got this nice delay. They go, it's an echo effect. So we will deal with it verbally and use the word echo and an echo effect. What this does is a couple things. The first concept here is that we have our initial well-sculpted, let's say we got a drum hit, okay? It's a beautiful drum hit. We've sculpted it perfectly. We've done our bodybuilding, and we're doing our spatialization, putting it in its atmosphere and place, right? So once we've gotten done with that and we're really happy with it, that to get this echo effect, a lot of times we would have to put it in a really big place, like get an impulse response of a big cathedral. The problem is it's trying to see that as three-dimensional, and trying to stuff that into two-dimensional space can cause mud. Plus, it's really hard to get control of it. So this is a problem. With echo effect, using a delay, we can control it, just like we controlled everything else with dealing with our spatialization. Now, this normally doesn't apply when we're doing our bodybuilding. This is when we're doing our spatialization reverberation. Now, the concept here, what we're trying to do is very simply, we've got this initial sound that sound sculpted perfectly well. We've cleaned it up. We've done everything so that so that it doesn't have any spatialization on it best we can, so we can work with it on our convolution reverb. Then we've went after it with our convolution reverb, and we've really got it nice, clean. Like we talked about, sometimes you get a nice song that you don't even hear reverb on the out front vocal, but it's there, that adds atmosphere and ambience that just makes it sound nice, lush and full and nice. Does that make sense? So we can add an echo effect to it that's going to help it do a couple things. First of all, it will give the impression to the listener that it's bigger. And this normally doesn't apply to tracks that are down farther in the mix. We're talking about out front tracks that are really going to be perceptible or perceivable slight variations, things like echo effect, that you're really going to be hearing because it's way out front, it's sitting on top of the mix. It'll make it sound bigger and fatter, and it'll make it sound like it's in a little bit bigger space but under control, because it doesn't multiply all the crap like if you put it in a big hall. Does that make sense? It takes the clean work that you've done and adds and echoes it. Does that make sense? So you get a clean reverberation echo effect of all the clean work you've done, which is very hard to describe. It takes experimentation on your part. And what happens is it happens later. So you got this initial hit, you've got the reverberation, spatialization work you've done, and then after that, you're going to get this initial echo, and then it's going to tail off. Either you're going to let it tail off a little ways, like if something at the end of a phrase or something, you can let it tail off quite a bit, or you can make the tail really quick where there's only like 3 or 4 echoes on it. Da-da-da, da-da-da-da, something like that, which sounds funny, but it can add a whole new dimension to the out front vocal to make it, the whole mix will sound like it's actually in a bigger space, but it's only actually happening to the out front vocal because you're doing this echo work on it. So there's really no really more in-depth work at understanding that. It's more of an understanding of the concept and then experimenting with it with your out front tracks. Now you can sometimes apply this to like supporting tracks like harmonies behind an out front vocal, but be really careful because you can end up with a muddy mess really fast. This normally I reserve to out front tracks to make it sound bigger and like it's in a bigger space that basically relates to the listener, that it's in a bigger space, it's fatter, it's wider, it's dot 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 dot. So basically we're dealing with a couple of different parameters. The only parameters we're really dealing with are the beats, you know, the amount of delays either set up in sync in beats or amount of delay in milliseconds, which is going to be somewhere outside of the Haas effect, say 36 milliseconds and beyond. And you're going to have a feedback loop that's going to see how many times it comes back, how many echoes, bop, 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 or bop, 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 or bop, 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 how many of them. And then a wet and dry, which normally you're going to want to mix 100% wet and dry, so you don't get any initial hit. That's coming from the track itself, and then you got the reverberations after it. They're going to start 15-20 milliseconds after that, and then you got this set 100% because then that echo effect is going to happen somewhere after that, right? And what it's going to do, let's say that I've got a vocal that's rambling along, but I want it to have that effect. I'm going to bring it in there somewhere after it, and I'm going to really contain my feedback so I don't get too many echoes. I don't want a bunch of echoes, just a few that just, you know, echo off just a little bit so I don't start mudding it. And things that are farther apart, like there's a difference between staccato singing and then I'm just running around and going around, and stuff that's a little bit farther apart that's like, then I go. That's a little bit different, right? So you can add, with your automation, you can kick the feedback up a little bit more or a little bit less to add a little bit more so you don't cause mud overlapping on things that are happening next, the next word per se. Does that make sense? But this is a huge tool to help you give the impression of a much bigger space that you can really control. It's very hard to control all that happening in impulse response, but you cleaning that up so it's not happening and then relying on your echo effect to attain that gives you this control of adding that atmosphere, that atmospheric aspect and effect, but complete control of it. So that you can control how many echoes you got. You can control how loud the first echo is before they start trailing off. Sometimes you can side chain it or something like that to have it happening in just one side or in a different channel coming in, or double the track and put it on a doubled track of its center or something like that. There's lots of ways you can do that to try to control that. But the effect is monstrous because let's say I got this front vocals, now I want to add that effect to it. So by that time I get done, I've got this little bit of feedback coming off, so you got a few echoes coming off it that make it sound like it's a bigger space, but it's controlled. So it's just echoing the beautiful work that we've done, that we've spent a lot of time controlling that environment, not giving this reverb effect, you know, unless it's really desired in some certain situation, but most of the time it's probably not. But it gives the effect of that spatialization gets projected onto the whole mix and all the other instruments when it's not really happening, because they hear that echo effect happening on things out front, and sometimes it's just lightly. Sometimes it is so light that I do it so lightly sometimes that it's hardly even perceivable, to where the vocalist, the ladies are going along, and then I go to the water, and you can't even hardly hear the echo effect, but it's there. If I took it off, you'd know in a heartbeat it was gone, because it's like, and then, and then, and it's just really lightly coming up into it. I've really brought the initial echo down, and feedback loop that I've brought in, it's only like maybe 3 or 4 echoes, is really light so that it doesn't start mudding it. But I can crank it up and it becomes really obvious that it's in a lot bigger space. But lightly, it just starts adding presence to it. And it's perceivable and it makes it sound like a bigger space, but it's one of those really acute listening and really critical listening things of what it's actually doing. And what it's actually doing is giving the effect of a place that actually has a little bit of echo, that used lightly and sparingly can just add to the body presence and effect of it being in a much bigger place that's going to reflect onto the whole mix, that's going to have the effect of making it sound like it's there, but it's not really, and it's really super controlled, that gives the effect of it's in a much bigger space, that doesn't have the mudding effect that echo effect can have if you try to run across a whole mix. Does that make sense? Or use it too much, you can have a detrimental effect. But sometimes you can even add a little bit more on things that are out front, and it's like, wow, it sounds like the vocal's like getting this echo effect trailing off, and then she sounds like she's in this really big space, and the listener starts to see that's happening with the whole mix, but it's really not. So because they're just paying attention to what's sitting on the top. The rest of the stuff is background noise that's supporting her, that is complementary to what she's doing, like, notes in a harmony. Does that make sense? But they're not paying attention to it so much that, audiophiles will and audio engineers will, so they'll pick it apart. But if they don't just pick it apart initially, that if they just sit back and enjoy the music and let it be what it is, they won't perceive that. Does that make sense? Until they start picking it apart and they go, whoa, that's really not happening the rest of the mix. But you have to understand most people are not listening to music that way. They want to enjoy the music and they want you to put them in this space with this wonderful production, and that's what they're listening for. So this can help you get to that bigger space without causing a mud in your mix, without convoluting your mix, and just causing a mess, which echo can cause a mess. But applied in this way, you can actually add quite a bit and really make it sound like your production's in a much bigger place, and a huge place sometimes, or not a huge place, with light echo effects that just add this other texture that really you need to experiment with to really understand the texture it's having, to understand the power that it can have on just giving the out front things, putting them in a little bit bigger space and getting the listener to perceive or think they're in a bigger space when the whole production really isn't. So it's that simple. And getting to the next level as a next level master audio engineer, when I'm speaking about this, is really you taking that concept and applying it. Understand exactly what I'm saying. The concept's not really hard to understand. Understand it's more of the concept of being able to get your mix in a bigger place, but you having complete control of it, and you being able to put that listener there to more or lesser degrees with complete control, and also to be able to use this echo effect to put it in a lot to make it sound like it's a really big space without causing a lot of echo mud running across the whole mix, because it's just sitting on things that are out front that the listener is going to be where their focus is at. So it's a huge tool to help you do that. So don't discount this in any way. Analog, I usually use my analog delays for this, but there's all kinds of delays that you use this for. You can use cross delays and all kinds of things like that. Have it ping, back, and bong and back and forth between the different speakers. Just be careful that this is stuff most of the time that's happening on things that are out front. And be real careful, because most of the time it's light work. Go light. And really sit down and you learn to acutely listening to the actual effect that's happening. Peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video in our second master series. And I certainly hope you have a good time experimenting with your echo effects to make your space perfect. See you in the next video.